Thank you, everyone, for attending. And I know that many people will be watching this afterwards. This is important content. And we felt that Nefesh B'Nefesh it was uh, of the utmost urgency to begin sharing more resources and having conversations like this. Is the beginning of lots of resources that we are going to be pushing forward over the next days and weeks. My name is Mark Rosenberg. I am with Nefesh B'Nefesh, and we are in very difficult times. The pain is felt around the world, and we are definitely, when we pause and enjoy our own personal safety that we are currently sitting in right now, there's no doubt about it that it's filled with lots of uncertainty about the future and causing lots of stress. I will just put out there that I'm feeling that way, and personally, and the opportunity to hear from a professional. We have Dr. Naomi Baum here with us, and to be able to get tips and understand what some of the best practices are for dealing with this type of stress that we are going under, a trauma we have experienced and we are experiencing. I will say to everyone here that I myself am speaking to a mental health professional. Even though I am functioning and coming and doing everything, it is important for us to make sure we're getting the proper resources that we can pull through the strength. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Baum. I encourage you to gather your questions and either write them in the Q&A now. They will be asked towards in about 15-20 minutes, or you can add them later on. The chat questions will not be asked. We have a team that's answering different questions on the side, but if you would like to present a question to Dr. Baum, please put it in the Q&A. I'll pass it to you, Doctor.
Okay, so am I up next, or is anybody else saying anything? That's it. Okay, so it's me, right? Right. Right. Okay, so good afternoon, good evening. Here in Israel, it's evening. For some reason, my guiding assumption was that I would be speaking to Olim, people who have made it here over to Israel and are here for really perhaps the first war, shall we say. And there's no doubt about it that the situation is a very difficult one for everybody, for newcomers and old-timers, and even people like myself who lived here in Israel since the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. This is a tough time. So how do we cope? And yes, we do cope. And yes, we will cope. And there are lots of things that we can do. But first, what I'd like to do is to stop for a moment. And this is a picture that I took years ago when we took a tiyul up north. And usually at this point, what I like to do is breathe. And I always tell people I'm breathing for myself more than for them. But the truth is, the reason I'm not going to breathe today because it's hard to breathe. When we're experiencing stress, our bodies really feel tight. And it can be even annoying for people to be told, just calm down and breathe. That can be really annoying. I find it annoying. I find it difficult. So I'm not going to say to you, sit back, relax, and breathe. But what I am going to do is say, let's take a moment and check in with ourselves, because I think so many of us are so busy and in that hyper aroused mode. And we'll talk about that in a moment, about how stress affects us and affects our bodies and affects our thoughts and affects our actions. So many of us are in overdrive that we forget to check in with ourselves. We forget maybe to eat breakfast, lunch, and arrive at dinner time and famished. And, you could eat the whole refrigerator because we forgot to see what's going on. We may feel like we're clenching our teeth, or that our chest is tight, or that our whole body is wound up, and not even be aware of it. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is look at the picture if you want, or something else in your room, or close your eyes if you want, and check in with yourself. Ask yourself, how am I doing right now? Not how was I doing earlier today or how will I be doing? How am I doing right this moment? And one of the things I notice when I say that is I take a breath. All of a sudden, I do take a breath. All of a sudden, I can stop and look in, check out, how does your body feel? Do a quick scan from the top of your head all the way to the tips of your toes. What's feeling comfortable right now? Is there any place in your body that's feeling comfortable? If there is, and hopefully you can find even the smallest speck of a space, breathe into that place and see if you can let it expand a little bit. And what thoughts are going through your head? What are you thinking? Are you thinking about your kid who's on the front line? Are you thinking about the missiles that are attacking Beersheba? Are you thinking about the green grass? Are you thinking about, gee, I'm kind of curious what she's going to say? Are you thinking about the soup that's cooking on the stove? What's going on in your head? What are you thinking about? And if you're able to take some of those thoughts, put them aside, put them in a box. They'll be waiting for you after we finish speaking, and allow yourself really to feel and be present here now. And that's really one of the costs of stress, is that it's very hard to be present. Our thoughts are going so fast, and sometimes our mouths are going so fast, and sometimes our emotions are so stormy that we have a hard time being present. So really what I want to do is just check in. How am I doing? And to talk with you, this is not going to be a super professional talk about the effects of stress on the nervous system and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and the what the only thing I want to talk about right now is how stress affects us. And look at this picture and think about, actually, we have stresses all the time in our lives, and we're always kind of moving within a certain window of tolerance. This certain window, if we have a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being very calm, very no stress, and 10 being the highest level of stress possible. So in our day-to-day lives, we have times, maybe Erev Shabbat, you're trying to get ready, Shabbat is coming, stress, lots of things to do, get the food, you know that feeling, stress. We're getting up there in the window. We don't usually make it above that line. In our day-to-day, we're usually functioning somewhere in that middle range, hopefully.
Dr. Baum, the slide is not moving forward.
Okay, thank you for telling me. And let me see what I can do about
We can
that.
see it small on the right, but we can't see it big.
Okay, so let me do a new share and let's see. There we go. Now, do you see it?
Yes, a window of tolerance, yes.
Right, excellent. Okay, so thank you for telling me. So, where was I? I was saying that most of the time we're within this window. When we experience very extreme stress, as we did on Simchat Torah, on Shabbat, on Saturday night, and probably well into Sunday, and for some people even up until now, we are over that black line, and we might be over it in either direction. Most people probably go into hyperarousal. Some people go into hypoarousal. They totally shut down. And you may be familiar with the expression fight, flight, or freeze. These are common stress reactions. And we're talking about fight or flight, that would be the hyperarousal, and freeze would be the hypoarousal. And the idea being is that when we experience stress, then this is something that's not in our control, our body responds, our body reacts. And we experience all kinds of symptoms. And many of you may have been experiencing some of these symptoms this week. Hypervigilance, any noise and you're jumping. You might feel agitated or angry. You might be filled with anxiety. and have lots and lots of worries, constantly worried, you'd be in very good company if you felt like that. You might have difficulties concentrating. You might have difficulties eating. Maybe your stomach hurts, or maybe your digestive system is off. You might be extremely tired. You might be extremely wired and have trouble falling asleep, or wake up early in the morning. All these are normal reactions and what we would expect to happen. And this is all part of what we call the acute stress response. And that usually lasts a few days. I think for many of us, we might even be noticing a little bit of a change. We might be noticing a little bit of a change from now, the way we feel right now, as to how we felt on Sunday. We're sort of beginning maybe to get used to this feeling of being totally wound up. That's possible. And then we talk about getting used to this period of long-term stress. It's not a one stressor. It's not a single traumatic event, but it's an ongoing stress. And it looks like we're going to be in this for a while. So we're going to have to get used to it. I think many of okay, so that's this slide. No, wrong direction. Let's see how we do now. There we go. So we have a little stress-o-meter here. And when I asked you to check in with yourself, I asked you how you're doing. If you check in right now and give yourself a number on a scale from 1 to 10, where would you say you fall right now in terms of how much stress you're experiencing? 1 being no stress, 10 being extreme stress. Where would you fall? And what I would really love is if you would write some of the answers in the chat so that I could see them. So if you guys can just hosts and panelists. Can we do this for everybody? Can I see everyone? Yeah, I can see everyone. So if you can 7. Okay, keep going. Let's see what else we have. If I had to guess without looking, I would say most of us are probably over 5 and over. 4, Mark, it's working. Go ahead, jump in. 6, 7. Let's see if we can get a few more people to respond. What level is your stress right now? I give myself a good 5, 6. Maybe 7, somewhere between 5 and 7. And I think it's normal. I think absolutely that is normal. Anybody else want to respond? We got another one. 7. Good for you. 8. Good. 7, 8, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we really are, for the most part, above 5, right? And somebody's chat is disabled, but if she's chatting, it's not so disabled. We have a 4. And that's great. Today an 8, yesterday a 10. And I think you might find, it's going to keep going up and down over the next few weeks. And what we're going to talk about today is what we can do to stay at a moderate level of stress and not get to that 10. We don't want to be up at 10. And when we're up at 10, we can't do too much. And there are things, and we're going to be in this for a while. So we also have to figure out how it's going to impact on our bodies and what we can do. And that is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. So how come now we're not moving? Oh. So what helps us? What helps us deal with this stress? And before we get into what helps us, I see that, one of the things that's happened this week is that I put together a lot of presentations relatively quickly. And I forgot to mention, I'm a psychologist. I've been living in Israel. I actually moved to Israel twice, but the second time I moved to Israel was in 1987. So I've been here straight through for quite a long time. And I've been a psychologist since long before that. And since the year 2000, I have specialized in the field of trauma and resilience building. Doing a lot of work with communities who've experienced natural disasters and man-made disasters, both in Israel and all over the world. So that is my background, but nevertheless, I have old slides and old presentations, but each situation is a little bit different and a little bit new. And this one is really very new for us. The situation for us in Israel is new. And even though some people compare it to Yom Kippur, it's actually quite different than Yom Kippur, because in Yom Kippur, the attack was on the front lines. It was on the soldiers. The civilians, I was a civilian here in Israel, and I lived in the center of the country. We were not under attack. We felt actually reasonably far from the front lines. And here we all feel, no matter where we live, that we're on some front line or other. The civilians are really under attack. So it's really quite different. And we have to take that into account. So one of the things that we notice, that we know about situations like this, is that there's a great deal of uncertainty and there is very little control. No control, as a matter of fact. We are not in control of the war. We are not running the war. We are not going to be deciding what happens or not. The only thing we control is ourselves. So these are the major stressors, okay? Our lives are not really in our control for the most part, and everything is so uncertain. So given that, what helps us? What can help us? And I want you to think for a moment, what were the things that helped you this week? And I'm going to give you an opportunity at a certain point to chime in again on chat. But what I'd like to ask you is, I'd like you to think about the things that help us. And what I'd like to share with you is the things that I know help people in high stress situations. So the first thing is support. And an example of support is coming together in a group like this, sharing, listening, feeling supported by an organization like Nefesh B'Nefesh, who is taking care of me and looking to see what my needs are. Of course, support means friends. It means family, whether they be living next door or be living abroad. Support is really what we feel here in Israel in a very strong way at times like this. People become very good-natured and very friendly and very willing to help. The outpouring of volunteerism is just incredible. Everybody wants to do something. Everybody wants to help. Now, it pays to think about the fact that Olim, people who come to Israel as Olim, are probably have fewer support networks than your typical Israeli. He or she may not have family members here. He or she may be a very newcomer and not have very big social networks. So one of the things to do as an Ole, you can be super sensitive like that and reach out to new people here in Israel to help provide that support. And sometimes that support is just a phone call or saying, come over for a visit or come over for a meal, or what can I do to help you? Just kind of noticing other people. So if you have your own support networks, great, turn to them and use them. And if you find that you're a little bit lonely and you don't, so reach out to a place like Nefesh B'Nefesh and look out beyond your door and see if there are other people in similar situations to you. It's really important at a time like this, super important, to pay attention to your bodies. We know in the last 20 years, the advances made in treatment of trauma and stress have been remarkable. And we know that many, many, many of them are body-based because trauma and stress are stored in the body. So one of the things we can do is really pay attention to our bodies and try to help release it. What kinds of things can you do to release the stress? You can do physical exercise. That's a wonderful, wonderful stress release, whether it be walking or running or biking or swimming or just doing. And if you can't do those things now for whatever reason, the kids are home or you're afraid of rocket attacks, then, there are plenty of things that you can access online to do. I myself am a teacher of Qigong. In addition to being a psychologist, I teach all my classes on Zoom. And for me, that's the way that I continue to move and pay attention to my body. We really have to take care of ourselves because stress really wears on the body. And if we ignore that, then we know what happens. We get sick. We don't feel well. Our functioning goes down. So we really want to pay attention and find ways to release the stress that's building up in our bodies. Another point that really pays to focus on, that's routine. So often when we encounter a highly stressful situation like we did this past weekend, so our routine gets totally disrupted. Those of you who have children, kids didn't go back to school. Some of you, maybe your jobs are shut down for a while. The things that you normally do are not working. And certainly for the first day or two, everybody's glued to the radio or to the television or to the computer. And then slowly, I think we're beginning to realize that we need to go back to a lot of the things that we normally do. And that routine, what it does is it gives us a feeling of control over our lives. It feels, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happens in a situation like this is that we don't feel in control. And when we have routine, we then feel in control, which is a good feeling. It gives us a sense of security. And certainly if we develop a routine with our children, if you have young children at home, medium-aged children, setting up a routine for them is also very, very helpful. Third point, activity, keeping busy. I can tell you with 3 children and 1 grandson in the Army, if I didn't keep busy, I would probably be ready for the loony bin. Keeping busy, first of all, you're distracted. You're hopefully doing something worthwhile. I hesitated whether to say meaningful activity, because meaningful activity is really wonderful. If you can find meaningful activity to do, that is a wonderful thing. It's interesting, this morning, one of my children was interviewed on the radio. He is the commander of a large group of soldiers up on the northern border. And the interviewer asked him, do you have enough stuff? Do you have enough, clothing and all the things you need? And what about food? Because we keep seeing on television here in Israel, this outpouring of food, this is a Jewish country. We like to feed our children. We don't like to think that anybody's going hungry, God forbid. And he said, we have everything we need, everything. And he said, food is not a problem. He said, it's not always hot food. Sometimes it's, whatever they call combat rations, manot krav. Sometimes they're combat rations. They're not hot, they're cold, but nobody is going hungry. Yeah, and he said, this isn't a day camp, or this is not an overnight camp. This is the Army. So yeah, it is nice to get all these treats that people are sending, but we're not starving. We're not hungry. And then I thought to myself that probably the reason that there's so much involvement with food and preparing and getting and bringing and getting and all the calls for deodorant and toothbrushes and etc., is it helps people feel like they're doing something worthwhile and meaningful. So activity is really important. The worst thing to do is to sit at home alone and watch TV. That is absolutely the worst thing that you could probably do. The best thing to do is to get out there, to be with people, to be active, to be busy, And if it's meaningful, even better yet. So get out there, find something to do, find a volunteer activity. And there's really, the resources are tremendous in terms of all sorts of projects that are opening up for people to volunteer. You meet people, you do things, and you feel good at the end of the day. Very, very important. So what are the things that don't help? Isolate. I just said staying home, watching TV, not sleeping or eating, and ignoring your physical body. Those are probably the worst things that you can do for yourself. So now this is a slide that I have in Hebrew, and I did not have it, chance to create it in English, but we can talk it out, and we can talk about what things are not in my control. And I think we've mentioned that the war is not in my control. How is it going to go? When are they going to bomb? When are they going? All those things are not in my control. What are the things that are in my control? What's in my control is how much media I consume, how much I stay in touch with family and friends, whether I decide to volunteer or not, screening the things that I do watch, not watching everything that comes my way, finding things that I enjoy doing. It's okay to feel good and enjoy yourself. One of the things that I've been noticing over the past day, I would say, if you notice, every day is a little bit different. We're like the movement, it feels like, every day is a year, every hour is a day. So things have changed so much over the last week that one of the things that I noticed yesterday and today is that if people ask me, so how are you doing? And I say, good. And then they look at me like, how could you be good? It's like immoral to say that you're doing good. My heart bleeds. I'm very upset. I'm extremely worried, yet I'm able to function. I'm able to do the things that I want to do. And most of the time, I feel okay. Every once in a while, I get a clench in my stomach. Every once in a while, my thoughts attack my brain and I have trouble pushing them away. All that happens. It's also true that even though I went to sleep at 11:30 last night, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't fall back to sleep. That happens to mothers of soldiers. It happens. It's a fact. I know that because my kids were in the Army for many years, and very often that happened. And that's just the way it is. And I say to myself, okay, try to go back to sleep, get up. I argue with myself for a little bit, but that's the way it is. I don't get too knocked out about that. That's the way it is. But I don't have to, going back to that, you're allowed to do things that make you feel good. You're allowed to get a massage. You're allowed to go and have a cup of coffee with a friend. You're allowed to watch something other than news. You can turn on a movie. You're allowed to do those things. It's okay. We're going to be in this situation for a while, and we don't have to turn ourselves into miskenim, into miserable people because of this. It doesn't mean that we're bad people if we're not feeling bad all the time. We're not. What we're doing is we're taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of our spirit, and it allows us to be strong, and it allows us really to continue. So let's talk for a few minutes about children. And when we talk about children, the first thing I want to say is that we can't talk about children. We have to talk about children of different ages. A 3-year-old is different than a 15-year-old, is different than a 10-year-old. So kids have different needs at different ages, and we have to remember that. But probably the single most important thing that you can do to help your child is to be a relatively calm, relatively centered, relatively regulated adult. Now, when I say relative, obviously you're not going to be that way every single minute of the day. We never are. Sometimes we lose it, and that's okay. But if most of the time you recognize that the way you are, the message that you are sending to your children is really the most important thing in the way they're going to feel and the way they behave, then there's a beautiful medrash on a pasuk, on the first sentence in chapter 121 of Tehillim, Perek Kuf Chaf Aleph. It says, Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift my eyes up to the hills, from whence cometh my help. And there's a medrash that says, Esa einai el hehorim. I lift my eyes up to the parents. Changes the word har, which means mountains, to hore, horim, parents. And I think it's a beautiful medrash, because basically what it says is our parents are the ones who give us that backbone, particularly when we're young children, particularly the younger we are. And we know this really speaks to current psychological research that talks about how parents' self-regulation directly impacts young children. So if a parent is highly anxious, post-traumatic, they will pass that on to their young children for the most part. So the more we can help ourselves, the more we can help our kids. And then the other particular piece that I wanted to mention, and I, by the way, I think it's very important to talk to kids about what's going on, but we have to be cognizant that there are different developmental needs. And we talk one way with a 3-year-old and a different way to an 8 or a 10-year-old. But the most important thing is really keeping the lines of communication open and allowing kids to ask questions, telling them, and if you're not sure what to tell them or how to tell them, you can say, like, what do you know about what's going on? What would you like to ask? What would you like to know? And take it from their cue. Remember, they don't have to know every single last detail. And you don't have to tell them about every single thing that happened. And certainly not the grisly details, and certainly not the pictures. I think you want to protect them from that. But they know that something is up. They're not in school. There's tension. Don't kid yourself into thinking that you can put the television on and watch the news and have the kid play Lego or Playmobil at your feet and not be affected. Do me a favor, turn the TV off when the kids are around. They don't need to see it. They don't need to hear it. And even if it looks like they're not listening, they're listening. They are affected. And that brings us to teens and screens. And this is a real issue. How can we control them? Do we control them? Or let's assume that we don't. And they've seen all sorts of horrible things this week. And what can we do about it? And I think what we can do about it is we can, again, open the lines of communication and talk about it. And they may not want to talk the first time, and they may not want to talk the second time, but I think it's our responsibility as parents to acknowledge and to be in communication, be in contact with our children about this. We may want to, some of us may be lucky enough to be able to control it, but I think many, many parents do not. And we have to teach them how they use media, how this affects them, teach them about how it affects them. So I think this conversation really has to open up and be ongoing. And if it doesn't work the first time, try again and try again and try again. And now I want to talk for a few moments about what helps us. And again, this particular picture is in Hebrew. There's a beautiful model called Basic PH. You can see it on the bottom. And what's nice about this model is it kind of opens up for us the way people cope. It's not that it tells us what to do, but it reminds us that all of us are different. We all have different ways to cope, different things that help us. For one, it might be going out and taking a jog. For another, it might be calling their best friend. And for a third, it might be reading a book. People are different and do different things. And there isn't one right way or one wrong way. The idea is to find things that really help you. And this model kind of pulls it apart and allows us to look at it. So I want to just take a moment and ask you folks, before we're going to pretty much go into the questions and answers in a minute. I want to ask you, though, while I have not been following the chat at all as things have going on, because I can't read and talk at the same time. So I'll have to look at it at a different point. But now, if you can write on the chat and tell me what has helped you during these past few days cope, what has worked for you? So I would really appreciate if each one of you, all 116 participants, write it down. And, the more we see, the more ideas we'll get. And maybe we'll try something that we hadn't tried before. So I hear going for walks, exercise, talking with friends and family, action, trying to see who needs help, also working. Working is part of routine, and that's excellent. Hugging my kids. Today I've been trying to stay normal. Well, I'm not sure what that means, but donations, that's meaningful activity, watching craft videos, meditation, going to nature, doing laundry, Emunah and Tefillah. So if we just take a few of these, let's say Emunah and Tefillah, that would be belief. And going into nature might be what we call imagination. Journaling might be cognitive, or it actually might be affect. We could put it in any one of these categories. Turning off the news, good for you. Good for you. Volunteering and keeping busy. And that's really, as we said, good sleep routine, volunteering. So you see, you all know all the things that I talked about. These are all the things that I talked about. And really what I've been finding this week, beautiful, being able to talk with friends, finding distractions, volunteering, tapping, beautiful. One of the things that I've noticed is that I'm reminding people of things that they really know. I doubt that there was anything really new in what I said to you tonight, but just kind of putting it together and reminding you that you do know about stress and you do know how to handle it. There are things that you can do. You might expand your repertoire, and now you have a lot of good ideas here in the chat of some other things that you can do that you hadn't tried before. And there you go. I have not given myself permission. So now you have my permission, right? You got it. You can go out and do things that make you feel good, because if by doing that, you are really helping to build resilience here in Israel. That is what resilience is all about. Which leads me to, I know there was a webinar earlier today for parents of lone soldiers, but I was thinking some of you might have children who are soldiers like myself. And when our kids when they call us, and we're so excited, and sometimes it's very emotional, I think one of the things we have to remember is take a breath and think what we can do that helps support them. And what we can do is tell them how much we love them, how proud we are, and to try not to cry when we're on the phone with them. So just a quick summary of the things that we talked about: stay active, find support, pay attention to your physical body, maintain some routine. It might be a different routine than you normally have, whether it's because the kids are home, your husband's in the army, your job is shut down, but find some routine. Have some self-compassion. We haven't talked about that at all, but don't beat yourself up. If you ate half a container or even a whole container of Ben & Jerry's last night, I did half. It's okay. It's okay. Be nice to yourself. Be good to yourself. And now, at the very end of our session, what I'd like to do is spend a moment breathing with you. I said we weren't going to breathe at the beginning, but now we are going to breathe. And what I'd like you to do is place both of your hands over your heart. Somehow holding your heart can help also to calm down. It's calming. And just see if you can keep your eyes open. You don't have to close them. Take a few breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And very often a feeling of gratitude might arise in your heart. Allow that feeling, breathe it in, breathe it out. Just notice it. Think of the things that you are grateful for. And that's a very simple, powerful breathing technique that sometimes works. So with that, I just want to mention one resource that I didn't talk about, but I think it pays to talk about. One of the organizations I work with is OHEL. You may be familiar with it. It's a mental health organization in the United States, and through the auspices of OHEL, I partnered with some of the people there, and we just recently put out this resilience workbook called Inner Space. I have a copy here as well. Oh, looks backwards on Zoom, but it's actually a paper there. You can get a copy of it in English from OHEL, but you can also download it for free at this website. And it's a nice workbook to work on with kids and to talk about difficult things. Talks about non-difficult things too, but it's really it's a workbook to encourage kids to talk about their feelings, to think about things you can do to make you feel better, to talk about how your body is feeling, all the things that we just talked about now. So if you're interested, have a look at that, and you can share that as well. And now let's open it up for questions.
Dr.
Okay.
Baum,
Yes.
this is Miriam from Nefesh B'Nefesh.
Yes, Miriam.
There are many who are participating today who have family abroad. Can you just give some tips when talking to family abroad, either those who want to say, hey, come back,
Right.
or who are being met with a little bit of resistance or just don't know how to talk to their family abroad?
Okay. So I think one of the things we need to do probably, it reminds me of what my son does when he calls me from the army. He says, oh yeah, everything's fine. They're feeding me. Everything is good. Yeah, sometimes we're working and sometimes we're not, sort of like calming them down. I think it's our job probably to calm our family members down. If they hear that we're hysterical, that's not going to do them any good. I would share those feelings perhaps of being really worried, really anxious with people who live here who can help you through that. Family members in the States, they're really concerned. But look, we're really concerned too. But unless you really want to go back, I think it's much easier to be here than to be there. I have a son who recently moved to the States for work just 2.5 weeks ago. He is beside himself. I feel like my job is to calm him down all the time and say, I know how terrible you feel. We're really doing okay. We're really doing, yes, it's terrible. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's awful. We are doing okay. And, it really is very hard to be far away at a time like this. It's very hard for your family members to acknowledge how hard it is for them. But I think, you can tell them that the pressure, if they're putting pressure on you to come back, that pressure is not helpful and that you're not planning to come back. Now, if you think that maybe you want to go back, so go ahead, be nice to yourself, do what you think is going to be good for you. But if you find that the pressure that they're putting on you is not helpful, I think you can say, look, your pressure is really not helpful. What you really want to do is to support me. What I need now is support from you. It is a hard time in Israel. We're doing okay, and we are going to get through this.
Okay, Doctor, we have a few questions that came in, and we have about 10 minutes or so left. One question that was asked, here's the easy one, then the hard one. The easy one, the question is, you said keeping busy as a tip. How do you find that line, be keeping too busy?
Oh, that we are not quite regulated yet. I would say, this week is that week where we're like all over the place. So I think coming into the weekend, will give us a chance to pause for a minute or two, maybe check in what's the right amount of busy for me now. It may be that I'd rather be working more than I normally work. I think that's not really a bad thing to be a little busier than we normally are. But the question is how much and for how long. So I think it's an excellent question.
Okay, thank you. I'm reminding you, if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A. Here's it's a heart-wrenching question. How do you stop thinking about those poor hostages, the horrors they're going through?
Yeah.
a family friend, this is their son, we're advocating for Hirsch Goldberg Poland's freedom. How do we stop thinking about it, or what's the appropriate way to think about it in this tough
Right.
circumstance? And there's more than 100 other people in that situation.
Right. And that's an excellent question. And there's not an easy answer. I really don't have an easy answer. I think maybe even doing something in that case, maybe, giving tzedakah charity or prayers, doing something that you can do in such a helpless, it is heart-wrenching. But just remember that you being heart-wrenched isn't going to help your friend and isn't going to help the people around you. So what you need to do is find something perhaps to distract yourself, to say, and it's okay not to think about it every minute of the day. If you think about it every minute of the day, it's paralyzing. It's truly paralyzing. And that's not going to help anybody if you feel paralyzed. So you can give yourself, again, some permission, some leeway to say, okay, I'm going to try to contain this. I am so concerned. I'm very concerned, but I cannot be thinking about it every day, all day. You can allow yourself to rest it for a while and take a break from it.
I think it's a really an excellent answer. It definitely gives me comfort. We have another easy answer and a harder answer. What's the timeline for getting regulated or rebalanced after a trauma like this? Obviously different for different people.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the hard question afterwards.
No, but I want to answer that also. I think, like I said, we don't really know. This is a situation that we haven't been in. I participated in a webinar of colleagues who are all in the mental health field just yesterday, and very senior people, my colleagues, my friends, all agree that this is a situation that we don't know. And we're learning as we move. We're learning. We don't know all the answers, how long it will take. And one of the things, and we also don't know what the future is going to bring. But we do know, people who are closer into the trauma, it takes longer. People who are in the outer rings, it takes maybe for many of them less time. But how long that is, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I appreciate your honesty. We had a few questions that were like this. People from North America are saying I should come back. They're asking what I could do from far away. You're feeling pulled here, you're feeling there. There's a guilt that one feels about being here. Another question.
About not being here. Guilt
about being here, about not being here, not being safe. There's a few questions, and another question on top of this in the same realm is I feel guilt about not changing my flight at this time to be with family, and then now I'm going to miss that. There's having family family far away is difficult. How do people manage? What are your suggestions for managing how we're responding that we're in this reality right now?
Right. So, we're Jewish, so guilt is part of our DNA. We like to feel guilty. Look, every situation is very much specific. How do you handle it? It's tricky. Like, do you change your flight plans? Somebody's having a wedding in a week. Do you go? Do you not go? Who are you leaving here behind? Every situation is very specific. It's really very specific. And it is very hard to be away from here. It's hard to be away. I can tell you that if you're planning to go abroad, it is really hard. I have been caught abroad during difficult times in Israel. Very, very hard. It's easier to be here. It really is easier to be here. For those people who are wondering whether they should come here, I don't have an answer for that. Yeah, I think it really depends what they're going to do, what they want to do, whether they want to be with their family, whether they have a place to be. There are lots and lots of volunteer opportunities here, depending on who you are, what your profession is, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a doctor, they're looking for doctors. And that's something that you probably, if you only speak English, you probably could do it. People are very creative when they come, and if they're really motivated, they'll find what to do. But everybody has to look at their own circumstance, and I would say that guilt is not going to help you make your decisions. So try to give it a rest and put it and go back to that self-compassion. Be nice to yourself. Don't be so judgmental.
And breathing allows you to be a little bit judgmental. I was about to do when he said it.
And we
Okay.
all, like, I really feel like every day, like I keep going back and forth. So like, after talking for an hour, I can breathe. Right at the beginning of the session, I can't breathe. I can't. And it's not because I'm so nervous. I'm always a little bit nervous, but it has to do with the general situation. And it annoys me that I even think that I might be able to tell people to breathe, because I don't think that's the answer. But by the end of the session, I say, you know what, let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. And to me, it feels good. So maybe some of the people here, it feels good to them too.
Well, we got lots and lots of positive comments in a lot of the chats and questions. And before we get to the last question, I want to just show a recognition of thank you, Doctor, for being here, and recognizing that just a lot of the feedback that people are saying is a engagement with these type of resources for your own mental health will give you a stronger resilience, will give you the outlet to process what's happening to all of us, to you individually, as a community, as a person. And it is part of the strength that we are wishing to one another. It's not just other people will give you strength, is that we have to be able to see it. And Nefesh B'Nefesh will be sharing more resources, other webinars that we're having. We have one on Sunday, specifically on the topic for having family far away. The last question that came in here.
That's wonderful.
Lots of thanks for coming to, Doctor. Is what's a suggestion that you have to improve focus? This person feels very unfocused, and he's sometimes even exhausted, even after sleep. How can a person improve their focus in a time where there is so much distraction? You mentioned disconnecting from the news cycles. Yes. What are other tips that you have?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think that it's a normal reaction. I can tell you that my level of concentration is much smaller than it usually is. I'm forgetting things. I'm misplacing. I'm a little off. I feel it. And I think as we regain our balance, I hope it will return. I think one thing to know is that it's very normal, as are most of the reactions that any of you are experiencing and wondering about. Most of us are having them. These are normal reactions to high levels of stress and exposure to trauma. And that's exactly what's been happening here. So first of all, relax into it. That's the first thing. And I hope that if you do some of the things that I've talked about, paying attention to your body, exercising, routine, eating properly, going to sleep, good sleep hygiene. If you do that, it will get better. Will it get completely better until this is over and finished? I don't know. Maybe not, and that's okay. So that's where the self-compassion comes in. Give yourself a little bit of a break. Okay. Don't go too hard on yourself. And I think, I said to my husband before I started speaking tonight, I said, so what do you think I should say to, truthfully, I thought you were all Olim, but now I know that many of you are Olim and many of you are abroad. And my husband said, quoting Charles Dickens, this is the best of times and this is the worst of times, or this is the worst of times and this is the best of times, because you really see the beautiful side of Israel here with everybody coming together. It's a terrible time. It's terrible. And it's frightening. And yet the strength that we get from being here and knowing that this is where we belong and that this is our country and these are our people, that gives us a tremendous amount of strength. Knowing why we're here and why we've come, choosing to be here, all those things give us a tremendous amount of strength. And that's going to see us through as well. The meaning that we find in just being here. And I think that's probably a good way to end.
That was an incredible closing. Thank you so much, Dr. Baum. Really took this break from a lot of stressful topics. I felt for this hour that we were able to disconnect from the swirling reality of what's going to happen, the sirens and the worry and the worries. And so I wish everyone who is watching this, either live or recorded, safety. The return of those who are not home should become speedily. Our prayers are for the safety of all civilians and that they are protected and peace be restored, and that we wish really good health. And it's going to be a very, very hard first Shabbat this upcoming week. So I want to wish everyone strength, and please be in touch with Nefesh B'Nefesh if you have other ideas for further sessions, and stay tuned for upcoming programming. Thank you.